The air inside the First Pacific Bank felt stale, like it hadn't been refreshed in hours. The line coiled along the dull gray floor tiles, snaking past the pot of fake ficus that leaned tiredly in its plastic pot. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, casting everything in a pale glow that made faces look washed out and eyes more tired than they already were. Outside, Los Angeles was cooking under the kind of summer heat that made pavement ripple. Inside, tempers were simmering too, but not from heat, impatience, frustration. Invisible battles no one dared speak aloud. At the far end of the line, near the end of the counter marked customer service, stood Linda Carter. She wasn't loud, never had been. 73 years old, retired schoolteacher. Known for her gentle voice and steely backbone, she had spent most of her life teaching children how to read, how to speak up, how to be better humans. Her students adored her. Her neighbors respected her. But here, in this gray room filled with muttered complaints and tapping shoes, she was just an elderly woman with a worn brown purse, clutching an envelope in her hands. Inside the envelope were her bank statements. She had read them carefully twice, then a third time with her reading glasses pushed further down her nose. In the past 2 months, a series of charges had quietly drained her modest account. Maintenance fees, transaction fees, fees for things she didn't recognize. It wasn't much. Not to someone well off, but to Linda, every dollar was food, electricity, medication, life. She had come once, then again, and now this was the third time. Each visit had ended with vague answers and dismissive tones. But today, she told herself, she would be firmer, she would demand clarity. She had earned that much. Next, a voice called from behind the glass. Linda shuffled forward, her flats making soft thuds against the tile. The teller behind the counter didn't look up right away. Brittany Wallace, early 20s. Sleek ponytail, acrylic nails clacking against her keyboard like machine gun fire. She was chewing gum, her name tag gleamed beneath her lanyard. Her patience, on the other hand, had clearly run dry. "Hi," Linda said gently, offering a smile. "I believe there's been a mistake with my account." Brittany barely glanced up. "What kind of mistake?" "There are fees," Linda said, unfolding the papers. "They've never been there before. I just need someone to help me understand. There. Standard charges," Brittany cut in, fingers still flying over the keyboard. "Probably because your balance is too low. That's just how it works, ma'am." Linda's smile faltered. "But I've had this account for over 30 years. I've always maintained it properly. These fees only started due months ago." Brittany sighed, exaggerated and loud. She snatched the papers from Linda's hand and flipped through them like they were napkins. "It's all in the fine print," she said. "You should have read it." A small laugh came from somewhere in line. Someone behind Linda murmured, "Classic." Linda's face flushed. She straightened, shoulders tense. "I did read it, and I'm just asking you to take a second look." "Look, ma'am," Brittany said, raising her voice enough for everyone nearby to hear. "If you want to avoid fees, you need to keep more money in your account. That's how banks work." More laughter. Not cruel, just casual, indifferent. It stung all the same. Linda felt the pressure behind her eyes, but she wouldn't let tears fall. Not here, not in front of them. Then a shadow moved behind the counter. A new voice entered the scene, cool, smooth, and coiled with fake concern. "Everything all right here?" Linda turned slowly. Carl Jensen, the branch manager. He walked like he owned the floor beneath him. Sharp suit, expensive watch, the kind of confident smirk that came with years of telling people no. He folded his arms and tilted his head at Linda like she was a puzzle he didn't have time to solve. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" he asked, though his tone said, "Don't waste my time." Linda opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. Behind her, the line was growing. Customers shuffled, phones buzzed, eyes rolled. Carl smiled politely, but there was steel behind his teeth. And somewhere outside that bank's thick glass doors, change was about to walk in. "Ma'am," Carl said again, leaning forward slightly, his voice smooth as butter and twice as greasy. "I'm asking, is there a problem?" The pause that followed was deliberate, a silence meant to apply pressure. Linda could feel the eyes behind her, the weight of the room shifting as people perked up, not out of concern, but out of boredom, waiting to be entertained. Nothing broke up the monotony of a long banking line like a confrontation. Linda adjusted the strap of her purse on her shoulder, her fingers trembling only slightly now. She'd been spoken to like this before, not often, but enough to recognize the script. She had taught generations of students how to listen between the lines of what was said, and what was meant. What Carl meant was, "You're wasting my time." What Brittany meant was, "You're old. You don't understand, and you're not worth the effort." And what the other customers meant with their glances and smirks was worse. "You're invisible until you're annoying." But Linda wasn't just a woman holding on to 73 years of grace. She was also holding on to something even more powerful: memory. She remembered students who couldn't afford lunch, who were written off just like she was being written off now. She remembered how many times she'd fought on their behalf when no one else would, and today, for once, she would fight for herself. She met Carl's gaze. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "There's a problem. I've been charged fees that I was not informed about. This is my third time asking for someone to explain them. No one has helped me, and I've been banking here since before you were out of high school." Carl's smile didn't waver. In fact, it grew. A performer who knew he had an audience. "We have policies, ma'am," he replied. "Those fees are system-generated. If you're having trouble maintaining the account, maybe a different kind of banking arrangement would suit you better." A slow, audible gasp escaped from someone nearby, more out of entertainment than outrage. Someone chuckled. Carl folded his arms smugly, knowing exactly what he was doing. He didn't have to shout. He just needed to make her feel small enough that she'd give up and walk away. Brittany stepped back from the counter, arms crossed, as if she'd been proven right. "I am not asking for charity," Linda said, more sharply than even she expected. "I'm asking for transparency." Carl's tone shifted, only slightly, still polite, but now laced with something colder. "Ma'am," he said with mock patience, "you're holding up the line. We've done what we can. Perhaps it's time you considered moving your money elsewhere if this bank no longer meets your needs." Linda stared at him. The heat inside the building suddenly seemed thicker, heavier. The overhead lights flickered slightly. Or maybe that was just her vision catching the tears she refused to release. She could walk away. She could turn around and save herself the final blow of public shame. But then a thought came, quiet but insistent. "No." More shrinking. She cleared her throat. "You're suggesting I leave the bank because I'm asking a question, because I want accountability." Carl leaned closer over the counter, his voice low, but not soft. "I'm suggesting this place may not be the right fit for you anymore. You can't afford the minimum balance. You don't qualify for the premium service. And frankly, our team doesn't have time to go over paperwork that's your responsibility to read." There it was. The final cut died hit her like a slap, but not because it was new. It was old. It was historical. The same tone that had told her father he wasn't welcome in certain schools. The same voice that had told her mother to use the other entrance. The same dismissal that had followed her into classrooms when she demanded better books, cleaner bathrooms, equal attention for black children who were always told to wait, to be quiet, to settle. And here it was again, behind a sleek desk with a polished name tag, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her pension check. But Linda didn't lower her head. Not this time. Before she could respond, a new sound broke the moment, a firm, commanding voice that cut across the space like a blade through glass. "Why are you talking to her like that?" It wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. It was the kind of voice that turned heads, not because of volume, but because of weight, authority, presence. Every conversation in the room paused mid-sentence. Even the hum of the overhead lights seemed to hush. Carl's single quotes as head turned slowly toward the entrance. Brittany blinked in surprise. A murmur moved through the line like wind through leaves. Standing just inside the door, in a black fitted t-shirt, jeans, and a low baseball cap, was a man no one had expected to see on a Tuesday afternoon in a midtown bank. He walked with a casual confidence, measured steps, eyes sharp, and then, with one simple motion, he pulled off his cap. Someone whispered it before anyone else dared say it aloud. "That's Vin Diesel." No one moved, not even Carl. Linda turned slowly, confused. Her eyes widened, then blinked as if trying to place what she was seeing. Vin Diesel walked forward. No cameras, no entourage, no noise. Just his voice, calm and clear. "I said, why are you talking to her like that?" Carl straightened, trying to recover, trying to figure out if this was a prank or a publicity stunt. "Sir," he began, clearing his throat, "this is a private matter between our staff and a customer. Then you should have handled it with respect," Vin said. "But you didn't." He looked down at Linda and offered a small, disarming smile. Mom, may I? He reached gently for the envelope still clutched in her hands. Linda hesitated, then gave it to him. Then turned back toward the counter, his expression unreadable now as he flipped through the paperwork. And for the first time in that bank's long, gray history, Carl Jensen was the one who looked nervous. The room held its breath. Something was coming. Something big. Something that would start here at a bank counter but wouldn't end until the whole world knew what happened inside these four walls. It started with one simple truth. Linda Carter was not alone anymore. Vin Diesel didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence alone said more than Carl's polished speeches ever could. As he flipped through the documents in Linda's envelope, the paper rustled louder than the murmurs now spreading. Across the bank lobby, people leaned in, trying not to be obvious, but drawn in by the gravity of what was happening. Cell phones weren't out yet, but you could feel the air change. Curiosity, suspicion, and something else. Something rare in a bank filled with strangers. Unity. Carl cleared his throat again, trying to retake control. Mr. Diesel, with all due respect, we're following established banking protocol. This matter. Vin looked up, calm and steady. Carl, right? The branch manager blinked. Yes. Carl Jensen. I'm the branch. Vin nodded, not impressed. Let's get one thing straight. I didn't interrupt because I'm a movie star. I interrupted because you spoke to her like she wasn't human, and you did it in front of people like it was nothing. The words landed hard not because they were loud, but because they were true. No dressing, no drama, just a man holding up a mirror. Carl opened his mouth, but no sound came. Vin turned to Linda, softening. You said these fees showed up recently. Linda nodded. Her hands were folded now, but her knuckles were still pale with pressure. 2 months ago, she said quietly. I've been coming back over and over, trying to get help. They said it was my fault for not reading the fine print. Vin studied her face, then looked at the envelope again. You've had this account how long? 30 years, she replied. Maybe more. Vin nodded once, slowly, before turning to the counter and lifting the envelope slightly as if presenting evidence in a courtroom. Carl, he said, let's pull up her account. Carl blinked again. Excuse me. Pull it up, Vin said. You said it's all in the system. Great. Let's see it. Brittany, the teller, hesitated. She was standing behind the terminal, fingers frozen above the keyboard. Carl shot her a glare. She looked between them in steady gaze in Carl's, trembling authority, and finally lowered herself into her chair. She typed. The monitor blinked the life. Vin leaned slightly over the counter. Behind him, phones were beginning to rise. Discreetly, nervously, people were recording now. On screen, the account scroll, deposit history, transaction details, fees. Vin tapped the screen lightly. There, see that? The fees didn't exist before June, then suddenly banned for separate charges in a single week, and not small ones either. Carl stepped closer, his hands visibly tense. Vin turned back to him. Explain it, sir. The system, Carl started. Vin didn't flinch. Don't talk to me about the system. Talk to me about people. Explain to this woman why, after 30 years of loyal banking, she was suddenly being bled for charges that were never discussed. Those are policy changes, Carl said. Defensive now. Were they sent to her? Vin asked. Voice still even, mailed, emailed, anything. Carl hesitated. Vin tilted his head. That's a no. Right, and more heads nodded behind him. A man in a work uniform whispered to the person beside him. Same thing happened to me last month. A woman with a toddler on her hip said aloud, Me too. Vin turned toward them, voice now carrying louder across the room, like the beginning of a sermon. How many of you have noticed new charges in the last 2 or 3 months? Hands rose, slowly at first, then steadily. Middle-aged hands, elderly hands, young hands. Vin turned back to Carl. You see the pattern? Carl tried to laugh. It came out dry and cracked. Mr. Diesel, this isn't your concern. It became my concern, Vin said. The second you humiliated her for asking a question, it became my concern when I realized she wasn't alone. I'm asking you to leave, Carl said now, his voice louder. Desperate. Vin raised a brow. You're asking the wrong person to leave. Carl stepped forward, lowering his voice. You have no idea how this works. Vin smiled. Slow. Dangerous. You're right. I don't understand how a man in a tie sleeps at night after treating a 73-year-old retired teacher like a nuisance. Explain that to me. The words hit harder than any punch in the movies. Carl's single quotes as composure fractured. Just a hairline crack, but enough for everyone to see. Let's check something, Vin said, walking toward Brittany's side of the counter. Since you're so sure these charges are routine, let's verify them for the last few customers, randomly, no tricks. You can't do that, Carl said sharply. Vin leaned in, inches from Carl's face. His voice dropped. Can't, or won't. Carl didn't answer. Behind them, someone whispered, he's scared. Vin stepped back, folded his arms. You're going to reverse those fees, all of them, and then you're going to apologize to her. In front of all of us. Carl blinked, dazed. And if you don't, Vin continued, glancing at the phones now clearly filming, then I'd be very interested in what your head office thinks when they see how you treat customers, especially elderly ones, especially on camera, especially in 4K. The silence that followed was absolute. Brittany looked at Carl, waiting. Carl looked at the computer screen, then at the raised phones, then at Linda. The man who had controlled that bank for years through fear, indifference, and passive power suddenly realized the room no longer belonged to him. Vin looked down at Linda. You've been waiting long enough, ma'am. And in that moment, it was no longer about money. It was about dignity. It was about truth. And it was about to go viral. A bead of sweat rolled slowly down the side of Carl Jensen's face. He didn't wipe it. He couldn't. Not with half the bank staring at him and the other half quietly filming everything. Their phones tilted just enough to catch his panic in perfect frame. What had started as just another Tuesday at the branch was now spiraling into something Carl couldn't control, something public, something permanent. Vin Diesel stood with the calm of a man who had faced down 100 villains on screen and a few in real life. But this wasn't about explosions or chase scenes. This was about one woman, one moment, and one truth that couldn't be pushed under the rug this time. Reverse the charges. Vin said again. All of them. I need authorization, Carl stammered, the words tripping over themselves. Vin raised an eyebrow. You're the branch manager. Either you have the authority, or you've been lying about that too. Brittany shifted nervously behind her monitor. She could feel it, the unraveling. The script she'd followed for months. The rules Carl had drilled into the team about who to help and who to ignore were dissolving in real time. She had played along, sure. She'd rolled her eyes at the elderly, denied fee disputes with a smirk, followed orders. But now, with Vin Diesel standing 3 feet from her, the reality of it burned against her skin. Carl hesitated, glancing at her. Brittany. But Brittany was already typing. Her fingers flew across the keyboard like she was trying to erase not just the charges, but every shameful moment she had allowed to happen under Carl's watch. The screen updated with a soft chime. Refunds processed. Adjustments made. Every unjust fee Linda Carr had endured gone. It's done, Brittany said quietly, without looking up. A murmur of approval rippled through the lobby. Vin nodded once. Good. But he wasn't done. He turned to the crowd, his voice low but rising with each word. How many of you had similar charges added in the last couple months? Let's see some hands. The room responded, slowly, at first, then more. Confidently. Hands went up across the room, not just 1 or 2, a dozen, maybe more. Men in work uniforms, women with strollers, seniors with walkers, all of them, quietly confirming what no one had dared say aloud until now. Vin pointed to them. This isn't a mistake, it's a pattern. He looked straight at Carl. You didn't just fail her. You failed all of them. Carl's face drained of color. You know how this works, Vin continued. Someone in corporate comes up with a way to squeeze a little more money out of people who won't push back. Small charges, buried deep in fine print, just enough to slip under the radar. You count on people being too tired, too busy, or too afraid to speak up. And when they do, you humiliate them until they stop. A hush swept through the room, heavy and full. Vin stepped closer, his eyes never leaving Carl. But here's the thing, he said, voice sharper now. You picked the wrong person this time. She spent her life teaching kids how to stand up to bullies, and today, she reminded all of us how it's done. Carl's lips parted, but no words came. Vin pointed to the phone still filming near the front of the line, and now the world gets to see it too. Someone near the back clapped soft. Respectful. Then someone else joined. Then another. And soon, the room filled with the quiet applause of strangers who had watched something honest unfold raw and rare, a kind of justice you don't expect in. Banks or offices or quiet places built on quiet suffering. Carl turned to Brittany, desperation in his eyes. Shut that down, stop the recording. But Brittany stood up, tall and unflinching. He's right, she said. Carl froze. We knew. The charges weren't fair. We saw who they hit hardest: retired folks, single moms, low-income accounts. But we were told not to challenge it. Her voice cracked. We were told to deflect, to blame the customer. Gasps echoed softly. Vin turned back to Linda, who hadn't spoken in a while. She was standing tall, her face unreadable, but her eyes held the tears of 1,000 moments just like this one. Every time she had been overlooked, every time she had stayed silent, every time she had accepted less than she deserved, because speaking up had always come with a cost. But not today. Vin looked down at her gently. You okay? Linda blinked slowly, her voice low but unwavering. I am now. Vin turned to Carl. One final time. You owe her an apology, he said, right now. Not because I asked, but because she deserves it. Carl's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Vin waited. The room waited. And finally, Carl lowered his head. Mrs. Carter, he began, barely audible. I apologize for the way you were treated. It was unprofessional. Vin crossed his arms. Say it like you mean it. Carl swallowed hard. I'm sorry, truly. You were right to question us, and you didn't deserve to be dismissed. Linda gave a small nod, not because she forgave him, but because she had finally been heard. Vin stepped back, allowing the moment to settle. And then, with that same quiet authority, he walked back toward the door, every step echoing with purpose. No camera crew, no entourage. Just a man who saw something wrong and decided to fix it. But the story wasn't over, because outside those doors, on every phone recording, that scene, a movement had already begun, and Carl Jensen's name was about to go viral. For all the wrong reasons. Carl Jensen's world was no longer the quiet kingdom of spreadsheets, policies, and unchallenged authority. It was breaking fast. As Vin Diesel exited the bank with nothing more than a nod and a quiet "Take care" to Linda Carter, the silence that followed was electric. Not hollow, not empty. It was the charged stillness that only comes after something irreversible has happened. Inside, customers stood motionless, phones still raised, as if uncertain whether the storm had truly passed or if something bigger was coming. It was the young man who had been filming the entire confrontation, the one in the hoodie with sharp eyes and quicker fingers. Lowered his phone and whispered, "Posted." One word, just that, and it sent a current through the room stronger than anything Carl could stop. The video was already live on every social platform, with captions like, Vin Diesel exposes corrupt bank manager for humiliating elderly black woman. This is how you shut down injustice. Linda Carter deserves better. Carl's face was front and center, his voice, smug and cold, recorded in crisp clarity as he told a 73-year-old retired teacher she might want to find a bank better suited to her finances. His heart slammed against his ribs. He turned sharply toward Brittany, who was still standing behind the counter, pale but calm. Shut it down, he snapped. Get him to delete that footage now. Brittany didn't move. Not this time. It's too late, she said softly. Carl stared at her like she groaned to heads. What do you mean it's too late? We'll call security. We'll contact corporate's legal team. Brittany shook her head. It's already trending. Carl's phone vibrated in his jacket. Once, then again, and again. He pulled it out with shaking hands. His lock screen flashed with notifications. Twitter, 30 for new mentions in mail. Urgent. Regional. Manager missed call. Corporate HQ news alert. Local branch under fire. After viral video, his stomach turned to stone. Across the lobby, a mother with her child quietly whispered, "Good." A man in a mechanic's uniform muttered, "About time." The power had shifted. Completely. Totally. And for the first time in his career, Carl Jensen wasn't in control. He was the story. He was the problem. And worst of all, he was recorded. He backed away from the counter, heading for his office. But the walk felt like a mile through quicksand. Behind him, whispers grew bolder. Laughter wasn't nervous anymore, it was scornful. No one feared him now. No one respected him either. He opened his office door, slammed it shut, and locked it. He leaned against it, panting, his forehead damp. His phone rang again. He looked. Corporate HQ. He hesitated, answered. The voice on the other end was ice. "Mr. Jensen, you need to explain yourself." Now. Carl opened his mouth, but no words came. The footage is everywhere. The voice continued. Your tone, your treatment of a senior citizen, the confirmation of unjust fees, were hemorrhaging trust. You've put the entire company under fire. It wasn't my fault, Carl began. You're the face of it now. The voice cut him off. And by tomorrow morning, you'll no longer represent us. Effective immediately, you're placed under suspension. Compliance will be contacting you. Double quotes click. Deadline. Outside, the door to his office felt smaller. Like it was shrinking. He was suffocating in his own corner office. And Linda Carter, she wasn't even thinking about him anymore. She was still in the bank, speaking to customers, strangers, really, who now looked at her with a kind of quiet reverence. The woman who didn't yell, the woman who didn't throw a fit, the woman who simply stood and stayed standing, even when they tried to push her to the ground. Brittany came around the counter. For the first time, she wasn't hiding behind her name tag. She approached Linda slowly, respectfully. Mrs. Carter, she said, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. Linda looked at her and didn't say anything. Not at first. The silence wasn't cold, it was thoughtful. Finally, she replied, thank you. Brittany's eyes watered. You didn't deserve that, any of it. Linda nodded once. But I survived it. And now, maybe others won't have to. And then another surprise. Someone from local media entered the bank, holding a camera and microphone. We saw the video. Do you have a moment to speak? Linda blinked, startled. Me? But before she could answer, the customers began applauding again, this time louder, more certain. Not for drama, but for her, for the woman who refused to be erased. Brittany turned to the reporter. That's Mrs. Linda Carter, she said proudly. And she's the reason everything changed. Outside, Vin Diesel was already gone. But inside, something far more powerful had taken root. Truth had cracked through concrete, and dignity had been restored. But one final moment still waited at Linda's front door, something she never expected, and it would arrive wrapped in an envelope with Vin Diesel's name on it. 3 days passed. Not much time, really, just 72 hours, but for Linda Carter, it was enough to watch the world shift beneath her feet. The video had gone viral. No one expected it, not even the young man who filmed it, who now sat stunned. During a live interview with a major morning show, as the clip passed the 5 million view mark, hashtags trended, news anchors debated ethics in banking. Social media overflowed with stories from other elderly customers' voices that had been ignored, dismissed, buried in silence. But now, they were speaking, and the world was listening. First Pacific Bank corporate headquarters issued a formal statement by noon the next day. We are deeply sorry for what occurred at our Wilshire Boulevard branch. We are conducting a full investigation into discriminatory account practices and unapproved fee structures. Moving forward, we are placing stricter oversight and prioritizing customer dignity. But for Linda, the real moment of peace wasn't in press releases. It came that same evening as she stood in her quiet kitchen, the warm light above her casting a soft glow over the counter. She sipped from her favorite mug, chipped along the handle, but still holding strong, much like herself, and watched the neighborhood through her window. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel invisible. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, another headline. Elderly woman teaches world a lesson in dignity with Vin Diesel by her side. Linda smiled softly. She hadn't asked for any of this, hadn't craved the spotlight or the applause. She had only wanted clarity, fairness, and a little respect, and yet, the world had responded with more than she ever expected. The next morning, she opened her front door and found an envelope. No logo, no stamp, hand delivered. She hesitated, picked it up. The paper was thick, high quality. Her name was written in elegant ink across the front. Ms. Linda Carter. Inside was a folded note, handwritten. You didn't need me to fight for you. You were already strong enough. I just wanted the world to see it, too. Finthar was. More. Tucked behind the letter was a glossy movie premiere invitation, personalized, with her name embossed in gold. And behind that, a signed Fast and Furious poster. Across the top, Vin had written, to the real hero in the room. Linda sat down at the edge of her porch step, the envelope in her lap, her hands trembling not with age, but with something more delicate. On her. She had spent decades pouring knowledge into children who society forgot. She had stayed up late grading papers by candlelight when the electricity bill couldn't be paid. She had marched when people said sit down. She had taught when the system said don't bother. And now, In her twilight years, she had unknowingly sparked something bigger. A reckoning. Carl Jensen had been officially terminated, not just from the branch, but permanently blacklisted within the banking industry. His name now appeared in internal memos across financial networks as a case study in institutional cruelty. Corporate had refunded every customer who was unfairly charged. They even launched a new legacy loyalty program named after Linda Carter, designed to protect elderly clients from exploitative fees and sudden policy shifts. Brittany Wallace, she had come forward during the internal inquiry, admitted what she knew, accepted her role. But she didn't run. She stayed. She apologized, and because she did, she wasn't fired. Instead, she was transferred to a community outreach division tasked with ensuring that what happened to Linda never happened again. And Vint, he never gave another interview about the incident, refused press requests, declined commentary. When asked why, his rep simply said, Vint said everything he needed to say in that moment. Back in Linda's living room, a small bouquet of lilies now sat on her table, delivered anonymously with a note that read, "For the woman who reminded us all how to stand tall." She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she walked over to her bookshelf and placed the signed poster beside her old photo albums. Not because it was Vin Diesel, but because it was a symbol. A reminder that dignity can win, that silence can break, that even when the world seems stacked against you, one steady voice can shift everything. And as she sat back in her chair, the sun pouring in through the window, Linda smiled. She was no longer just the woman who had been humiliated in a bank. She was the woman who refused to shrink. The woman who made the whole world watch. And the woman who reminded us all that the right person doesn't always arrive with noise or fame. Sometimes they walk in quietly, take off their cap, and stand beside you right when you need them most.